That wasn't the case in the Arab world. The Arab world, the rulers, they own, they rule, they exercise absolute power. And that's what the Arabs now have come to revolt against. And so that brings me to the question that was raised with Islamists versus authoritarian rulers and democratization. Could it work? Well, now you have a new big factor. Millions of Arabs who are taking it to the street, and they say they want to topple the regime. They don't want to be ruled by individual. This is the recent slogan in Syria: no for the individual, no for the family. لا للفرد ولا للأسرة. This is what they're saying. In fact, in that sense, the Arabs are some sort of ahead of Turks in that quest for true democracy. Yet the Gulen and the Islamic movements in Turkey did not have to ask these kind of questions, did not have to face those realities of absolute oppression in order to come and ask this question of power. What Gulen has theorized and has contributed in terms of Islamic thought is also based on not just the philosophical approach to Islam that he shares with the culturally secularized military elite in Turkey, but he has his own cultural choices. He happened to be a practicing Muslim, and so to him, he thought that the state should free religion. That is, the state should not impose the religious choices on people. And in fact, what the state is doing, the military elite is doing, it's imposing its own choices when it comes to religion on other people. When it comes to the issue of the headscarf or other things, even in terms of teaching religion in schools. They do teach in religion in schools, but they teach their own interpretation of what religion means. And that is, to Gulen, that is a form of imposing a state imposition of religion on people. Those questions are not raised very much in the Arab world. The Arab world happened to come from a more of a what I call a fiqhi tradition to Islam, more of a juristic tradition to Islam. Yet, what we've seen in the Arab revolutions, this is a major point I want to make, is that the Arabs as masses are moving way beyond this fiqhi tradition, and they're going more and more into the philosophical understanding of Islam. The philosophical understanding of Islam is an understanding that organically combines understanding of reality with what people think Islamic values are, what the teachings of the Quran and the traditions of the Prophet, what they mean in their life, as opposed to the what you might want to call orthodox or traditional or conservative juristic tradition, and that is approaches issues, whether private or public, based first on what has been written in the past about those issues. And so this is why the jurists are now playing a catch-up game with the revolts. There has been a raging debate in the Arab world after the masses have taken their decision and came out wanting to depose the regimes, wanting to end dictatorship, something that is still work in progress, I should say, and has been pointed out before in the previous panel. But the jurists started asking the question: is it halal for people to come out against the ruler, or is it not halal to go against them? The Wahhabis, of course, for very well obvious reasons, said no, you cannot come out. You have to listen and obey. And you get Qaradawi going on Al Jazeera say, well, this pertains to stopping oppression, stopping dhulm. And dhulm and justice, adl, are predominant concepts in the Quran, which means that and Qaradawi is a top jurist and scholar and very well respected in the Arab world across different Islamic movements, particularly the Muslim Brotherhood. So that is, but these discussions come after the fact. The people have established by their own feet their right to make a decision on who and how, who should get to rule them, and they have decided that governance should be based on popular legitimacy. But who are these people? Well, there are a lot of they're Islamists, they're secularists, they're nationalists, they're Copt. They're people who are not affiliated with any group. That's in Egypt. In Tunisia, it has its own picture of diversity, and it includes just about a lot of those. There are not many Christians in Tunisia. In Yemen, the same thing, with the south and the north and the different tribes. But the youth aspect is probably the common element in all these revolutions, because the youth are the most to suffer from oppression. They're not just suffering in terms of lack of political rights and emancipation. They're also suffering in their own very livelihood. They don't see a bright future for themselves. So and they have associated this with the power structure, and that takes us to the nature of the contemporary state. The contemporary state is so intrusive, something that in the Islamic tradition hasn't known, and it is so intrusive in terms of its imposition of its own institutions, its own values, its own structures, its own laws on the various aspects of lives of society, from your birth to your death. You have to go through the state or state systems, regardless of whether they are ruled by Democrats or dictators. So that's and that's something common between the Arabs and the Turks. Now, Gulen has grown in an environment where there is a great degree of democracy for the civilian sector, at least. Has been able to mobilize support, has been able to build institutions that deal with the elite and institutions that deal with the grassroots. Institutions that deal with the elite are the mass communication institutions, are the groups like the Writers and Journalists Foundation, that acts as a de facto think tank, like the Rumi Forum as well, which is part of the global Gulen movement. And as the different, like Baqiyad, which is an intercultural organization, they organize a Turkish festival every year in California, a huge one. And so they show pride in Turkish culture, and so to them, Turkish Islam is the identity. Being Turk and being Muslim is the identity that they have accepted. So the Gulen movement, I would say, have reconciled itself with Turkish nationalism. In the Arab world, Arab nationalism was led by authoritarian groups that kind of created some sort of a gap between Islamic movements and states, especially at the time of Nasser, that has been kind of receding. This kind of cultural this thing has been receding, which has contributed to the growth of a pro-democracy outlook. Now, what do Arabs can learn? What do Arabs learn from the Gulen movement? I think a major thing is that the sophisticated definition of how a social movement relates to the state, how it relates to power play. Gulen has decided, by looking at the Islamic tradition, that democracy is the best form of political system that can meet the requirements of Islamic values, the Islamic value of shura, of justice, of compassion, when it comes to the public sphere. And as such, a faith-based social movement does not need and has to stay above partisan politics, above the contest for power. But as such, the social movement can be so powerful in the sense that, I don't want to say it can be the kingmaker, but I would say it can frame public discussion through those institutions and through those mass media that Zaman newspaper is the largest distributed newspaper in the country. And Arab parties and groups have newspapers, but they've been kept down because of oppression, because of the oppressive regimes. And that's something that the Turks probably can thank the military for. But the fact that Gulen would not endorse any political candidate, would not get involved in saying who gets to be the next prime minister, does not stop him from raising his voice when it came to systemic issues of public concern. The referendum over constitutional amendments. That relates to what the state is and what the definition of power is all about. And that stuff relates to the work of social movements. The Ergenekon trials, the trials of the military leaders suspected of plotting to topple the government. He's in support of it because that is a systemic issue. In the Arab world, at least the Muslim Brotherhood now, and this is the last comment, they're learning from this. And to them, the Turkish, when somebody invokes the Turkish model to them, they refuse it, but to them that it means a military controlled political system. They don't want that. But they want the Gulen-inspired ideas of separating politics from social work. Rashid al-Ghannouchi, and this is the last thing, would not give any answer on a political question when he is in the mosque. So the mosque is not the place for it. There have been practices and mistakes along the way. Probably some of them came out in the media, more in the local media than in the international media. We can deal with it, but that's part of people learning what kind of democracy they want.